G'day everyone, it's Doc Joe here from Story of Games, and today we're going to be working on a space station, but not just any space station. This is going to be a Catholic cathedral in space, or rather it was in space because it's actually fallen out of the sky, crashed into an ocean, flipped upside down, and the very few survivors that are in that space station now have to try and get to the very top of it. Basically, the Poseidon adventure in space, in the ocean. And not only that, we're throwing in a whole bunch of sort of tentacled, starfish-like evil monsters that are going to infect the ship as well. So this is a mad, crazy adventure, horror adventure, no, if you probably guessed, for Halloween, and it's for tonight's game. So all of this was the brainchild of Ray Duell. Ray is one of Storyweaver's horror writers. He's brilliant. Really evil sense of humor and a great creativity. So when he started talking to me about this idea of, sort of the Poseidon adventure, but in a horror setting with definitely a dark theological element to it for the Rapture universe setting, we started talking about what the space station would look like. And he immediately said, I want it to look like the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. Now, if you don't know the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch, there you go. A quick search will let you see it. Now, yes, it's from Monty Python, but you get the idea. Now, as soon as I saw this shape for the space station, I immediately thought to myself, this makes a lot of sense for the Rapture universe. The Rapture universe is very, very hard sci-fi. Pretty much everything in that setting is based upon a ground of hard science, with the exception, of course, of the theology, which we've been very authentic to, but everything else is rock hard science. And the colony ships that can travel faster than light, they go what they call superluminal, they're pretty much all spherical. And the reason for that is they have to create a specialized gravity reactor right in the middle of the ship that creates a spherical field, basically a singularity around the outside of the ship. They then make tiny adjustments in that gravity field, which fires the ship at faster than light speeds. And because everything on the inside is inside, sort of like a pseudo black hole, they can travel faster than light. So when I looked at this design, I immediately thought, maybe this is a retrofitted colony ship. And then we got talking about who would be on board, why it was a monastery, and so forth. So the basic, you can see just by talking about a map, you can actually start to draw out story elements and story ideas. So obviously there'd be a group of colonists who were originally on the ship. They're probably down now on the planet where the space station has been orbiting. This big cross section which they've put up there is actually a monastery, which was an add-on after the fact. So they've built that after arriving on this planet and then turned the colony ship into an orbital. In fact, an orbital monastery come research center. And now it's fallen out of the sky and has landed in the water and bad things are happening. So let's get to the design. That's enough of the background. Now, as many of you may know, I've developed symbol sets for very rapidly creating side views of space stations. Here's a space station I've opened up as a template to start with. I'm just going to save this as, and I'll save it over, let's call this gray. We'll call this the Grace Temple. There we go. Okay, and I'll delete everything on here. Boop, and gone. The first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how I want the space station to actually be structured. Now, even though it is this weird looking shape here, there's a temptation to think of this, especially it's going to be crashed into the ocean, that the decks would run horizontal to each other, much like a building. But this is not a building, it's a space station. And in the Rapture universe, they do have anti-gravity, but it's expensive to run. So usually for space stations, they rely upon centrifugal force. So what they'll do is they will basically create rings of floors that go around it, much like you've seen in 2001, and then they'll spin the whole thing to try and calculate a level of gravity. Now, of course, if that then crashes into the ocean, now it's got real gravity applied to it and no spin, what that's going to mean is that all the rooms and the floors, all these rings, are now going to be at a 90-degree angle to where the characters need to walk through them. And of course, all the debris will have fallen down and there's water coming in. So that just makes for an unbelievably complex map to draw. But let's start with the basics. Let's start with a cross section. Now to do the cross section, I'm going to make sure that I've got the hull selected and hull selected as well here. There we go. Hull layer and hull layer. I'm going to grab, oh, actually before I do this, I'm going to check my grid settings. I've got 10 meters, 2 snaps. I'm just going to check this. It's actually 10 meters, 1 snap. I'm going to change that temporarily to 50 meters, 1 snap. Actually, I might make it a bit smaller than that. I might make it 25 meters, 1 snap. That's the name of it. That's the snap divisions, and this is 25 meters. Now, the reason I've done that is so that I can very quickly add a circle in, making sure I've got black, hull, click on my circle, and I'm just going to refresh the screen a bit there. There we go. So that is now a 25 meter diameter spaceship. Now it's 50 meters. It's now 100 meters across, and I'll make it 75 meters or 150 meters point to point. That's actually a pretty damn big interior mass. Quite often people think that a spaceship is big on the outside. It must be big. You know, if it's big on the outside, it's big. Volume doesn't work that way. We need to be thinking about volume when we design this. Otherwise, we're going to have something which is just absolutely impossible for our small collection of heroes to get through. But a ship of this side, which is 150 meters diameter right across, that's a huge interior volume. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my grids back to 10 meters by 1 snap, and we'll change the spacing there. Changing the grid settings as you work on a map is a really useful thing to do. It doesn't sound that intuitive, but it's actually very, very effective. Now, just going to zoom in here, and then I'm zoom out a little bit. We can see that we've got a center line. It's actually offset. So I'm just going to move this map. I want that center line to be right in the middle. So I'm going to actually need to change this to 2 snaps. In other words, 5 meter snap increments, because I want to make sure that I've got a line, one of these little fine dotted lines that you can see. I want that to be running perfectly through the middle of the map. So I can eyeball that there, move it to there, move it to there. That way you can see I'm on a 10 meter line through the middle of the map. Now, that wasn't hugely important, but it does make things easier for lining up when we work on the rest of the map in the future. These little things about making sure that your alignments are always spot on so that you can get symmetry are really, really helpful. And you'll see why later on. Now, I'm going to put on the cross on the top. We'll make that 20 meters, and we'll just run that down into there, like so. And then we will run the T-bar across. I think that's a little bit, let me just bring my Antioch, Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. Yeah, it's more in the middle, so I'm just going to, I'm going to undo that with Control Z. I'm just going to move that down slightly. There we go, about there. Now, I've only drawn one side, and there's a reason for that. We'll get to that in a second. Now, if we take a look at our lovely design here, there's all these lovely little bubbles and things around it, and that would look good. So we're going to try and mimic that. To do that, I'm going to call upon a special catalog which I created, and I'm just calling it up now. There we go. My Space Station Construction Kit catalog. I'll make sure that's available. And it's one that we've got loaded here. And let's go and find some things that we can stick on the outside of it. Well, for a start, maybe we've got a sensor tower. That's pretty big. Okay, I'm going to drop some of this down, making it a bit smaller. And in fact, what I might do is I might place this, whoops, I might place this on the bottom. Let's just rotate that around. There we go. And now it's currently got tracking on. So as you can see, this is a smart symbol set. I'm going to try and turn that off. So I'm going to turn off the smart tracking. So I can just place this exactly where I want it, like so. That's not exactly what I wanted. I really wanted these little dome shapes because I want to put some of these lovely little filigree sort of around it. So I think this is a good dome, a good dome shape. There we go. And, oh, I need to turn the smart tracking back on, of course, like so. I'm going to turn the snap off. Now that's too large if I do it that way. Maybe I'll draw these on. What I'll do is I'll turn my snap back on. I think that's probably about the right size. And then I'm going to use the move and copy command. And let's just put these around the edges here. That's probably better. Yep, okay, I like that. Let's add a little bit more filigree to these. We might have, I'm just looking again at these endpoints on our cross. Let's put something interesting on the end. I'm going to rotate this one. Like so. I'll put a small piece of travel through that. That looks good. We'll need something on the top piece as well, so we can do something similar. We'll actually make these ones different. Let's make them, and I'm going to make this, there we go. That's too big. I'm going to reduce the size of that to half, and I'll bring that one in, and they get a nice little wobbly thing on top as well. And that one's too small. So you can see I'm right clicking to bring up this contextual menu. There we go. Excellent. Okay, now let's join all those pieces up together. Okay. There are also little wobbly bits on the side of this as well, and I can probably just get that by simply drawing a sphere like so. So I think this needs to be moved in a little bit more. Oops, wrong thing. I wanted to use the move command. So we'll move this in. Now all we're doing at the moment is just adding a little bit of style to this, and I suspect this piece also needs to move down. So I'm going to delete that piece there. In fact, I don't actually like that piece. I don't think it's quite the right shape for what we're talking about. It was a good idea, but no. Let's just drop that one in like so. Too big, maybe. Let's drop it down by 0.75. Let's move that into place. Yeah, that's better. Okay, now we've got, and we might put a little raised line in through here as well to sort of highlight that banded appearance. Okay, so we've got this onto our lovely space station, but it's still not right because we need all of this on the other side as well. Now, the reason why I only worked on one side of the starship is because there's a wonderful function called mirror. It is your friend when designing starships. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on all the pieces that I want to mirror to the other side. That's them. I'll click do it. Now, remember why I took so much time to try and align the center of that sphere to a single line of dots, to the grid line? This is why, because we need to draw the grid line down like so. And bingo. Now we have a fairly good looking space station. Now, I'm not totally happy with that cross. I think it needs to be a tiny bit more squat. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that center spire, like so, and I'm going to replace it with a center spire from this collection. And we've got lots of options in here. This one might look good. I'm going to make it full. It's sort of close. It's not quite right. Let's try this one. Ooh, yes. That looks wonderful. There you go. So this catalog, I'll make it available online. It really does help to quickly build out these stations and whatnot. Um, I feel like it's sort of a bit boring on the bottom there, so I might close down this part of the catalog. Now, when I created this catalog, I created it so that there were groupings, spine elements and so forth, domes and whatnot. I'm going to go for another dome element, probably this one. That's too big, so I'm going to reduce it by, say, 50%. I'm going to rotate it, and we will place it there and then drag it in. Now, the reason I'm placing them off and then dragging them in is that I don't have to keep on switching backwards and forwards between that auto tracking. Now, because I selected that item in the middle, I can just align it again to that middle line element. And voila, there is the side view of our orbital. Okay, so just to recap what we've learned so far in this part of the lesson, it's really important that you work with your grid settings, that you change those grid settings to make laying out your map fast. The other thing is really useful is that when you're creating a symmetrical map, which we've got here, always try and align your centerpiece of the map, in this case the big sphere, on one of the grid lines that's going to be a really common grid line for you to use. In this case, since it's 10 meters, it needs to align to a 10-meter snap. The other thing is that you should go about creating your own symbol libraries and use them, because it makes speeding up work so much faster. If I tried to draw this little piece here or these little pieces here, it would have taken me easily another 15, 20 minutes. Having a library really supercharges your mapping. Doubly so in science fiction, but also in dungeon mapping and overland mapping and cities and so forth. So those are the two things I want to take away from this part of it. Now, we're going to get a little sciencey.